The most important thing to understand about burnout is it's not your fault. Even if there are personal factors, a lot of personal factors that added to your vulnerability to burnout, those personal factors were developed based on things that you had no control over.
You're listening to Make Some Noise Podcast, episode number 528 with guest Cait Donovan. Welcome to Make Some Noise Podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited about today's guest. Cait Donovan is here. And so I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, and they have like a women's, Facebook group. And I was going to the conference. They have 2 conferences a year, 2 big conferences. And I was going to the one that happened in March. And I was like, it would be fun to have a roommate. I'm such an extrovert, and I'm like, save a few $100 and meet someone new. So I posted in there in that Facebook group, hey, who's going to the NSA Winter Conference? If you are, would you like a roommate? Here are what qualifies me as a good roommate. And I listed all the ways. And this woman commented, and she was like, hey, we sound like we'd be a good match. DM me. And it was Cait Donovan. And we had so much damn fun together. I haven't laughed that hard in so long. We had to put caps on how late we were staying up because it turned into slumber party, laugh so hard, you're going to pee the bed type of thing. And I knew I had to have her on the show because she talks about burnout, and she has a really popular podcast. And I'm of course going to tell you about it. And I just adore her. She's so smart, and she's such a phenomenal keynote speaker. And before we jump into that, I do want to mention that I have 1 spot open for private coaching. If you listen to the show, maybe you've heard a few of the podcast episodes that I have on where I coach people on the show, and you are in the middle of a transition. Maybe there are some boundaries that you need to set, some hard conversations. Maybe you want to know what your values are and lean into them and see what your life could look like if you did that more. Go to andreaowen.com/coaching, and there's application there. And if you're not exactly sure what it is that you want, sometimes just even looking at the questions on the application can help you do that. If we do end up on a 20, 30-minute call together, I will be honest with you and tell you if I think I can help you or not. And 95% of the time there is a fit, and we can make magic together. Of course, there's no obligation if you do fill out an application and get on a call with me, but I would love to chat with you and see if we'd be a great fit. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about my friend and colleague, Cait. Cait Donovan is the host of Fried, the Burnout Podcast. She's a keynote speaker and author of the book, The Bounce Back Ability Factor, and a burnout aficionado. Her creative burnout recovery solutions have been featured on podcasts and online magazines such as Forbes, NPR, and the New York Post, and in companies such as Lululemon, PepsiCo, and the New York Public Library. So without further ado, here is Cait. Cait Donovan's here.
Isn't it just wild?
I mean, I was so hoping this day would come, and here we are. You and I became fast friends and stayed up a little bit too late laughing, and you almost made me pee a couple times in my bed, which I appreciate. But we're not here to crack too many jokes.
We have big things to talk about.
We do. We have important things to talk about. And in all seriousness, I couldn't wait to have you on because my audience, there's a lot of high achievers listening, some type A personalities, and the majority of them, some not, but a lot of them, are from the United States, where our culture is go, 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 produce, produce, produce. And even if you didn't grow up in the US, and it is that way, and other countries and cultures too. So let's start from the very beginning, because I know that there's some people who hear the word burnout and they're like, is that just like when you get really tired or like sick of your job? So can you talk about Like, what are the symptoms? How does someone know that they're there? Like, do they have to get a diagnosis? Like, what does that look like?
This is an easy and a difficult question all at once, because it's not necessarily yet considered a diagnosis in the US. So in the Netherlands, absolutely, you can get a diagnosis. In the US, not necessarily. Right now, the World Health Organization considers it an occupational hazard, which is not the same thing as a diagnosis. There is an ICD-Q code for it. ICD codes are the codes that you need to diagnose things. If you are if you're a healthcare worker, you know an ICD.
So it's like a billing type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there is a code for it, but it's kind of like not really used, and there's no reason to use it because it doesn't get you anything in the US. It's not like it doesn't get you anywhere. So they're still working on that. However, that being said, in 2019, end of May 2019, the World Health Organization decided that they were going to adopt the definition of burnout that has been created by burnout researchers who have been doing this research since quite literally before I was born. So the first big research on this by Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter, who are the big names in burnout research, came out in 1976. And the three components that there's earlier studies on it, but that they were a little more haphazard. The three components that must be present in order for someone to say this is burnout. The first one is physical and emotional exhaustion, which to me is a little bit silly because that covers everyone I've ever met and every symptom that you could possibly feel.
And it's also subjective.
Yeah.
I think for women, like, we can take a lot of that bullshit before we,
Yeah.
Something needs to change.
So it's kind of like, that's okay. The next one is cynicism and detachment. So this one is a little bit, I think, if you're a high achiever and you were naturally positive to start with, falling into a place where you're being really cynical and really negative all the time is a shift for you, and that will be more noticeable. But if you are someone who tends toward pessimism in your normal life, this is not going to be as drastic a shift. You might not see it. The detachment part of this has to do with feeling like you are alone, nobody can support you, nobody understands what you're going through, this kind of stuff, which happens when we get pregnant, when we have babies, when we do, like it happens a million different times in our lives.
There's nothing out there that could possibly help you.
Right.
Yeah, I've been there.
And then the third part is they write it differently in different places. In some places, they write that it's a reduced efficiency of work, so a lack of productivity. And in other places, it's written that there's a sense that the work that you do is not impactful. So maybe you're A, not getting enough done, and B, you don't understand what the point of it all is. So this can be true no matter what your work is. This was one of the main reasons I realized I was burnt out, because I was literally helping people make babies. I was a fertility acupuncturist when I started my burnout cycle. And is there anything like more important?
I know.
And I did
helping
not
continue the human race.
Did not care. Wow. The only reason
it was purposeless.
The only reason that I was happy when my patients were pregnant was relief for their emotional strife that they'd been going through, and relief that somebody else would be coming off my very full calendar.
Yeah.
That was my response. Like, that's not an appropriate response.
Okay. So the three of just to quickly recap, it's physical and emotional exhaustion, feeling cynicism and detachment. And then the third one is what again?
Feeling a lack of impact of your work or lack of productivity.
Lack of productivity. Okay. Yes. I've been in that place a couple of times.
Yeah.
Probably 3 times over the course of the last, decade and a half of doing this work. Are there certain industries that experience this more? I'm making the assumption that helping professions like healthcare, therapists, teachers, like the kind of helping professionals, but is it sort of all across the board, like into corporate America? Like what do the stats show?
The stats show that burnout is at a rate of anywhere from 38.1% to 89%.
Oh. Could be a few people, could be almost everyone.
Exactly.
We don't know.
And that's really the answer to the question. First of all, because burnout assessments are a little bit hard to do. There's the Maslach burnout inventory, which is one that's used pretty commonly, but it needs a little bit of updating. And there's a couple of other ones, and we haven't used them well enough or long enough for them to be valid and reliable. So there's kind of a big question mark. And I think that I just wrote a paper on the fact that people that experience high levels of childhood trauma tend toward higher levels of occupational stress, which leads towards higher levels of burnout. Within that same paper, while I was reading through all the research, one of the themes that popped out at me was that people that have higher levels of ACEs scores, this adverse childhood experience score, also tend to be the ones that choose helping professions. So in the average population, in order to have like one ACE score, it's about 16% of the 16.7. So 17% of the population has one adverse childhood experience like on their docket. Nurses were, I think the number was 72%.
Wow.
Police officers were 53%. Teachers were also over 50%. So I think that there's yes, these professions are also set up to harm you. Like there are workplace factors, there are systemic factors in play. And those are the ones that we have the most research on. They are workload, lack of recognition, lack of community, values mismatches, right? There's 6 different factors. But then if we look at the personal side, we're looking at if 50% of the people coming into this profession don't have well-developed stress systems and cannot respond appropriately, not through no fault of their own. This is not blaming anyone. Please, from the get-go, please understand that there is no blame or judgment here. There is simply, you got 7 points out of 10 from the get-go, and everybody expects you to be able to function at 12. So the people that got 10 points, they're sort of managing and doing okay and having worse days once in a while. But the people that only got 7 points are like, how can anybody handle this?
Let's talk about the ACE score. I had a client who was a special education teacher, actually, and she said that they had a professional development training come in, and they did the ACE score, and she had never heard of it before, and she scored really high, and it was all very interesting. So can you explain what that, for people who don't know, like that score of 1 to 10, what is the ACE score, the test?
ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's usually, you'll see it in the literature as big A, big C, big E, little s scores, ACEs scores. I called it ACE scores for like 2 years. So now I'm trying to correct myself in as many places as I can.
Okay.
And so ACEs scores, there's usually a series of 10 questions that ask you about things that happened often or very often before your 18th birthday in your home. And everything you say yes to counts as 1 point. And the questions are things like, did you experience physical violence against yourself? Or did you witness physical violence in your home? And those are 2 separate questions. So either one of those can get you a point. So sometimes these things get overlooked because it didn't happen, quote unquote, to us.
Right.
So
was someone in your house active addict? Was someone incarcerated?
Exactly.
Does
somebody have a chronic illness, or does somebody have a mental illness? Was there neglect, etc.?
And there's only 10 questions, so it's not like 70.
No, it's 10 questions and 10 points. And what they've shown is that there's a dose-response relationship between ACEs scores and later depression, poor mental health, anxiety, and other physical illnesses like stroke, heart disease, and diabetes. So a dose-response relationship means that the more ACEs scores you have, the worse results you have later. So for every 1 point in ACEs scores, you get one worse thing later, kind of. I mean, of course, it's not a 1-to-1, but dose response just means the more you have here, the more you have there.
Interesting. I made a TikTok several months ago, and it was something like, if you were somebody who your feelings were neglected or dismissed, how's that helping profession working out for you now? And it went viral.
Yeah.
And the amount of comments of people saying, just listing all different professions, a lot of teachers, nurses, law enforcement, people who rescue animals, like all of those. It was really interesting. I didn't expect it. It was sad and also really, really interesting. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to talk about resentment in regard to burnout recovery. So we'll be right back. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Okay, so you have a keynote called Resentment is the Burnout Recovery Tool We All Need, which made me very intrigued. So can you tell us why resentment? Like, what is the connection?
Resentment is the emotion that will teach us where every single one of our boundaries is out of whack.
Mm-hmm. That I do know. Yeah.
Right. It's a very simple statement. I'm not the first one to say this. This is Gabor Mate talks about this. Brené Brown talks about this. You know,
talk about it in the 12 steps of recovery.
It's part of recovery. It's part of it. Like I was in Al-Anon as a child because my father was an alcoholic. So I went through the Al-Anon process as a child. So I probably got some of this messaging then that I didn't realize I was going to be using 30 some odd years later. Mm-hmm. But here we are. And so to me, first of all, you can't set boundaries if you don't know where they're being broken.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get boundary information from the internet and then go out and like throw up electric fences all over the place. And then everybody around them is getting shocked. And they're like, that's because you wanted me to be weak. Like, whoa, sister, slow down, roll it back. Like, we don't need electric fences. Mm-hmm, for the most part. Every once in a while, somebody needs one. That's okay.
Sure.
But we don't really need them to be all the time. And I'm going to say something extremely controversial.
I can't wait. I love those.
No is not always a complete sentence.
Thank you. But Instagram memes tell us they are.
And like, no.
Next question.
Next question. I don't think we're doing a great job at boundaries. And I think one of the reasons is because we're not addressing the things that come before we set them. First, we need to look at the resentment and find out where they're being broken down. Then we need to assess the things that are broken down and start to understand if they are our own choices, that we are overstepping into other people's gardens. People are not jumping over our fence. We're jumping over other people's fences. You need to fix that part first. That doesn't usually require a lot of conversation. That's just a lot of you not doing the shit you've been doing for 20 years that nobody's been grateful for anyway.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of that, of what that might look like at work?
Yes. So say you decided the first week of work, you were going to show up with cupcakes. So you bring cupcakes into work and you're like, hi, I'm the new girl. Like, here's the cupcakes. And everybody's like, yay, new girl's cupcakes. 3 weeks later, somebody's like, hey, cupcake girl. And you're like, shit, now I have to be the person that brings the cupcakes. So you start making a list of everybody's office birthdays and you start bringing in cupcakes for every single birthday because now you're the cupcake girl and you've taken on this responsibility.
And you kind of like the attention at first, probably, of like being the cupcake girl.
There's good feedback. Mm-hmm. Jumping over our own fence to take care of other people typically starts out with you getting good feedback. That's why you continue doing it.
Yeah.
So you hop over the fence, you hop over the fence, you hop over the fence, you bring the cupcakes, you bring the cupcakes. And then you're like 2 years in, your kid puked that morning. Your boss yelled at you yesterday. Your husband just told you he wants an open marriage. And you're like, really? Now I got to go get cupcakes?
Not the kind of cupcakes that you were looking for in your marriage, I guess.
Like, what the hell? When you start to feel resentful about the fact that you're always the one that brings the cupcakes, you have to stop bringing the cupcakes. Mm-hmm. But you have to deal with the associated guilt that comes from that. Not that you're supposed to feel guilty about that, just that you probably will because you're human.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens.
So this happens in a lot of different ways. Somebody starts off in the company and they're new and they ask you a couple of questions in the beginning. So you give them the answers that they need because you know they need a little bit of help. And then all of a sudden they're asking you for answers that are in a spreadsheet that they have. Mm-hmm. And you're still answering them, but you're like, Jane, you have the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And so you start to get a little passive aggressive.
In your emails.
Yeah. And every time her name pops up in your inbox, your eyes roll and you're like, what does she want now? Open the damn spreadsheet, Jane. Just open the spreadsheet.
Damn it, Jane.
Damn it, Jane. Meanwhile, you set up this relationship. Mm-hmm. You didn't say, hey, Jane, these are the numbers that you need. Here's where I found them. When you need them next time, look here. You answered her questions 14 times without giving her the information she needed to get the answers to the questions. And now you're mad at her for not having the answers to the questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've written about this in my books. And it's funny, like I'll be at an event and people will ask me, they'll give me a similar scenario. And they're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, did you read the chapter where I like laid out exactly how to have the boundary conversation? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, did you do it? And they're like, no. So do you have any advice? Some people don't want to take mine.
Well, I think there's two different conversations to have because we're either talking about internal boundaries or external boundaries. Some internal boundaries, the ones where you're jumping over your own fence into other people's backyards, don't require a conversation. Some of them don't. You can stop bringing the cupcakes without telling anybody about it. Mm-hmm. You just stop.
Yeah.
You can do that. If Jane keeps asking you for something, you probably have to say something. But this goes back to, you say the thing you should have said the first day. Tell Jane where the resource is and how to use the resource. And say, I'm not going to be able to answer this question for you anymore. Here's the resource that you need. You'll find everything right there. And then you move on. But external boundaries are a different thing. External boundaries are when people are exploiting us. So Jane was not exploiting you. You might feel like she was, but she wasn't. She was just playing the game that you set up.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't personal.
It wasn't personal. But when people are exploiting your boundaries, when people are stepping into your space, when people are jumping over your fence and walking in your front door, and you're like, what are you doing in my house? Mm-hmm. Creep. That, to me, those conversations need the word BRAT, B-R-A-T. BRAT stands for belief or believe or beliefs, resources, abilities, and trust. Some combination of those words will help you to formulate a sentence that is clear, kind, and concise, that doesn't have any passive aggressiveness, and that hands the power back over to whoever is asking you for something, to saying, hey, no, you've got this. You can do this. So I believe in your ability to use these resources. I trust that you'll find the right thing that you need. I trust that you can this works even with your children. Mom, there's nothing to eat. I trust that you can find, if you open the refrigerator and you use your eyes, I trust that you are going to find everything that you need to have something to eat,
Fill your tummy.
to fill your tummy. Right. So not all of those words all the time, but one of those words, I trust you, I believe in you, you have abilities and you have resources. I trust you, I believe in you, you have abilities, you have resources. When you keep saying things like this to people all the time, they start to understand that they are trusted, you believe in them, they have abilities and they have resources.
And that you're not going to bend over backwards anymore to wipe their ass for them.
Well, what they don't understand when you're using these words is that they're not even thinking about that part because they're now focused on themselves.
Oh,
right. They're not thinking about what you're not doing for them anymore because they're like, oh, I can do. You're right. Most people want to believe that they are resourceful, that they have the abilities, that they can take care of themselves. So reinforcing this for people is an excellent way to set boundaries that doesn't require you to like explain yourself, but it's also not just being like, no.
Right. Which I want to ask you about in a second. Yeah. But that example that you just gave about helping people realize that they have the resources to be able to take care of themselves. I'm thinking of some families where there's adult siblings and the parents might be still taking care of one of the children, like financially, and then the other siblings are like resentful about it.
Why are you in my life right now?
I may have personal experience with that, and I may have some clients who deal with that too.
What's the question?
Well, I want to circle back about what sometimes when no isn't a complete sentence. Can you give an example of maybe like when it is and when it isn't?
Yeah. So when somebody is asking you to do something that's like really not your job, and if we're talking in the workplace, it's really not your job, it will require you to stay late, or it's some sort of like super extra thing, you can just say no. Like, no, I'm not doing that. Like that can be the end of the story. However, if there is a situation where it kind of has to be all hands on deck and everybody's pushing beyond their boundaries, because sometimes this happens. What I need everybody to understand is no matter how great your boundaries are, sometimes you're going to violate them because you need to, and that's okay. My rule is if you have to violate your own boundaries, you've got to pay yourself back somehow. But say everybody in the office is staying late and you literally can't.
Yeah.
Your mother is not going to get fed in the hospital if you don't get there. Like, you can't. For whatever reason, you really can't. In situations like that, where everyone else is making a sacrifice, you're not required to explain yourself. But if you want people to grant you any sort of grace and compassion, you might need to tell them as much of your story as you feel comfortable with.
Some context.
A little bit of context. Not because you owe it to them, not because you need to justify it, but because humans are really bad at granting each other grace and compassion without context.
Yeah. Especially when you're part of a team like that.
Yeah.
It's, to me, that points also to like trust and within a team. Okay. Thank you for that. I want to ask you about psychological safety, because that is a topic that you talk about in regard to burnout. So what does that mean?
Psychological safety is a couple of things. First, it's your ability to mess up or say something wrong or do something wrong within where this is, again, we're talking about in a workplace without fear of retribution, without fear of being made fun of, shut down, bullied, etc. So that you can mess up and you will still get supported. Psychological safety is also, we're going into Brené Brown work, right? We're going into your world now. Psychological safety is also belonging, is not having to adjust yourself to fit in because you are accepted for who you are and what you are and everything that you bring to the table.
That is tricky, I think, especially when it comes to people who are in marginalized communities.
100%. I don't think that they're ever necessarily psychologically safe. I think that's one of our biggest work hazards that exists right now.
Yeah. Which actually, I want to pause for a moment and ask you about that in regard to burnout. Are there any stats that show that burnout is more prevalent with people who are part of marginalized communities, especially, people of color?
Not yet.
I'm shocked that they wouldn't do research on
that.
that.
I was just going to say, and we know why.
Right.
My assumption is that, yes, because of the social determinants of health, people in marginalized communities tend to have a higher ACEs scores. And with higher ACEs scores, you're going to have higher levels of occupational stress later in life, which would tend toward more burnout. This is a hypothesis of mine and an assumption of mine, something that I believe in strongly, but I don't have research to support it. There is research that Black female therapists do have more burnout because of secondary trauma, because they're going through their own experience of living as a Black female in the world. And then they are listening to other Black women and Black men share their experiences about being Black in America. And so they're living through their own stuff and other people's stuff. And so that secondary trauma is creating a big problem in the Black therapist community.
Okay. How does one create psychological safety if they can?
Psychological safety, I think, starts off with clear leadership. So this starts this is leadership level work, first and foremost. Somebody on LinkedIn ages ago, and I wish I could remember their name so that I could give them credit, said that he starts his weekly meetings with his team with his last week's failure. This is how I failed last week. And either here's the solution that I found, or I haven't been able to fix it yet. Does anybody have any ideas? This opens the door for everybody to be able to share about something that they're tripping over, that they need help with, that they haven't figured out, or that they did figure out, so that they can share and say, hey, I tripped over this, but I figured it out, in case somebody else needs that solution. So starting off with failure shares is a really great way to create psychological safety. One of the other ways that I really, really love is playing the Just Like Me game. Do you know the Just Like Me game?
I don't, but I think I would like it. What is
this
it?
Is Shamus Pitts taught me the Just Like Me game. The Just Like Me game is when Jane emails you again for the stupid numbers on the spreadsheet, and you roll your eyes and you get annoyed, and you're like you are now othering Jane because you're like, Jane can't get her shit together. The Just Like Me game is stopping and saying, Jane just wants to get her work done properly, just like me. Jane has people at home that love her, just like me. Jane has hopes and dreams and ambitions, just like me. Jane wants to be healthy and happy, just like me. Is rehumanizing each other by finding a sense of shared humanity. And this is something that each one of us can do. This does not depend on leadership. This is something that every single person can do, no matter where they are, to increase the level of belonging for everybody.
Yeah.
So those are two ways that I like, that I think are really cool.
That reminded me, talking about our hypothetical poor Lady Jane here, it reminds me of, did you ever watch Parks and Recreation?
I didn't.
Okay.
I was out of the country during that time.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a workplace, basically. It's an office, it's a Parks and Recreation. And there's a group of like 4 of them, and they make fun. They bond together by making fun of, is his name Gary? DM me, you guys, because like they call him, like, as a joke, they call him like Barry and Larry. I think his name is Larry. That's how they have like weekly meetings about and like laugh about all the things that he did that week. And like there was this whole episode about it. And of course it's a show, it's a sitcom. But I'm thinking to myself, like, how often does that happen? Like where somebody becomes like the butt of all the jokes at work. I've worked in offices like that, and I've participated. Embarrassingly, I have participated, but it is incredibly dehumanizing, and it creates a shitty culture.
And this is something that shouldn't be encouraged by leadership, but also is really something that people can work on a single person level, on an interpersonal level.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with that person, but it just means like,
can we talk about this for a little bit? I wasn't expecting to go here today, but it's bubbling up in the back of my throat and I can't not.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
People talk about oxytocin as being the love hormone. It's intimacy, it's breastfeeding, it starts contractions to give birth, it's bonding.
When we have sex.
Yeah, right. It's intimacy, it's bonding, it's all of these things. Oxytocin has like a shadow side that nobody wants to talk about.
Ooh.
So oxytocin isn't really like only the love and connection. It's sort of like a social scan of people that should be included in your circle and people that should not. So when oxytocin has decided that somebody doesn't belong to your tribe, it flips on them. And it becomes really hard for you to find compassion for that person and to include that person, because your hormones are telling you they don't belong. There's either been some lack of trust or some dislike of some sort, or something's happened that has
something othering
that makes you say, no, ma'am, not here, not today, Satan. Mm-hmm. And this is, if we go back to tribal times, people always talk about the lion or the tiger or the saber-toothed tiger being the thing that created fight or flight. That was not the thing that created fight or flight most often. People knew when there were saber-toothed tigers around. Like they were in tune to that.
They knew how to avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah, like they could follow the prints. Like they knew where they were most of the time. Of course it happened, but like that was not the big fear. And the big fear that we still have, the big fear that hasn't changed, is being ostracized.
Mm-hmm. It's shame.
It's shame. It's not belonging. Because back then, if you were ostracized, if you were pushed away from your tribe, you didn't have enough skills to survive. Not every single person in the tribe had all the skills. That's why they were a tribe. Mary got the berries, and, Sally got the cow, and whatever. Like everybody had their job. Everybody had some sort of input. So being ostracized meant that you weren't sure which berries you could eat all of a sudden.
I mean, I think we all have experienced that. Yeah. Whether we are the person that's othered, and my heart goes out to those people who've experienced that kind of trauma, or we just have witnessed it. But it's interesting to me that oxytocin is a part of that. It doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Because it's a physiological response that we have. What's interesting to me is, and I'm sure people listening can relate, is, and I still, like, it makes my stomach hurt to think about. So I was the kid who, people are surprised when I tell them this, but I actually was a very shy child, and I didn't really even kind of step into my extroversion until high school. But when I was a kid, I remember the kids who, and I kind of flew under the radar. Like I was never really the popular kid back then, but I also was not the kid that was ostracized. But I remember those kids who were.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling paralyzed.
Yeah.
Of not being the kid that participated in the making fun of, but also not being brave enough to stick up for that kid for fear that I would join and then become the kid that was made fun of.
Yeah.
And I still remember the first and last names of those kids.
Me too. They're in my head right now. I can see him in my face in second grade classroom. I can see him.
And I just makes me curious about that. Like, and I'm sure there's hormones involved in that too. And just this natural inclination to not be ostracized, just to try to get any kind of psychological safety that we can.
Yeah. But I want to sort of allow people to understand that if they are the person that's like the perpetrator in some situations, that there might be this sort of hormonal neurochemical thing happening that in order for you to be kinder, you have to override mentally. You have to do the just like me game. You have to get curious about this person and find something to connect with. You don't have to ever like them, but you have to know what's happening so that you don't become the bully inadvertently. And I've done it. I'm not saying this is totally avoidable. Like this is an embarrassing part of being human, I think.
Yeah.
But it is a physiological response. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. And I want to just underscore that. It's not like if you have participated in that, I honestly don't think that you're a bad person.
No.
I think that just whatever was going on, everyone's trying to get their needs met. And sometimes we do that in really crappy ways.
Yes.
Trying to belong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to take one more ad break, and I want to ask you again about boundaries at work, because I think it's just something that really needs to be talked about more. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI Care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. You know when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone, a father, daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who is graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise. Sometimes I get this question and I am like, I don't know the answer because I haven't worked in corporate America for so long. It is really not my area of expertise. So can you kind of talk us through how someone would set a boundary at work when maybe the boundary is with someone in leadership and they're like, I don't know how to go to this person. Like, do I go to HR? Like, what is kind of the protocol that people should take? I know that was really broad, but maybe you can give us like some common instances.
Well, I think it depends. There is a lot of space here to work in. If the person offers you any level of psychological safety, you have a one-on-one conversation first.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, you have a conversation with someone else in your team that's a peer first to assess your assessment of the situation. Because if you're coming into a situation and say you have anything over 4 aces is considered high. So say you have like 5 aces in your back burner, you're coming into the workplace. One of the things that you're likely to be unable to do is assess people's intentions properly and assess your safety properly. So you might just, when you grow up in situations where you're constantly unsafe, you tend to create this belief that it's your fault. Kids do that. Then you carry that through your whole entire life. So you get into a work environment that's a little unhealthy and you tend to think that everything's your fault. Yeah. And then you overinterpret people's words. You don't trust that people are saying what they mean. You feel like everything is a manipulation. So if you're in this situation and you trust your boss, go to your boss. If you don't trust your boss, you go to someone that you do trust that's more likely a same level peer and say, hey, I want to break this situation down. Can you tell me how you see it? Not because they're more right than you, just so that you can see if you still feel like after they explain it, there's another explanation, there's a different way to look at it. Maybe you were missing something that you didn't know, right? So before you go to HR, get some sort of consensus about what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
Then go to HR.
Okay.
And have the conversation.
And hope for the best.
But to me, boundary building at work is a data collection practice. If you are consistently attempting to build boundaries at work, the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, am I actually building boundaries or am I making requests? Because those are different things, right? A request is, I would like you to stop emailing me at 6 p.m. A boundary is, I'm not going to respond to emails after 6 p.m.
Right.
Those are different things.
Boundaries, if this, then that.
Yes.
Type of thing.
Yes. If this, then this is my response is a boundary. Asking someone to change their behavior is a request. That's not a boundary.
I call that sometimes just a hard conversation.
Just a hard conversation.
Yeah.
So
uncomfortable.
Make sure that you are making, if there's a request, that you're making the request. And if there's a boundary, that you're stating the boundary. And make sure that you're not hinting. A lot of us learned to do things like, oh, it's cold in here. Instead of being like, hey, can we turn up the heat?
Yeah.
I'm cold. It's cold in here doesn't say anything to me about your needs.
Right. Well, that actually brings me to my next question, because I was doing some research this weekend because I'm writing another book and I'm doing a short chapter on the various ways of poor communication. And I came across stats about people who are passive aggressive. And this happens a lot at work. And actually one of the stats that I saw said that a lot of people quit their jobs over that because someone or some people are chronically passive aggressive.
Yes.
So can you talk about, like, say it's a more like a coworker type of situation where you don't necessarily need to go to leadership or HR. Can you kind of walk us through like how you would address that? Even if use that example of like somebody who's like, oh, it's so cold in here, or gosh, this email that I sent you, I don't see a response. Did you respond?
I like to just call these things out immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of when they're happening. It's cold in here. I will look at someone now and say, is that a request to change something, or are you just making a comment?
Mm-hmm. You're just thinking out loud.
Just ask the question. So for me, the answer to these things typically is curiosity. What is it that you're trying to get to? Trying to get to create enough space for someone to say the thing that they actually want to say. And this is really hard for people that have been taught their whole lives to not speak up about their needs. So I don't blame anybody for not knowing how to do this.
Especially women,
right? We're taught to ignore what we want and need all the time for the sake of pleasing others. Like it's constant in our lives. So I'm not blaming anybody for this, but I start to get curious. Well, then what do you need something? I probably wouldn't say it like that. Right. But I would start asking, is there a request that you would like to make? Are you cold or is it cold?
Happy to help. Was there something you needed me to do?
Exactly. I get to the point where I would almost force the person that I'm interacting with to come out with a straight answer eventually. I just made an appointment recently with a somatic practitioner, and she sent me intake forms, and she said, it would be good to have those by Friday. For me to have them? For you to have them? Do you want me to print them and fill them out and send them to you? Do you want me to fill them out online and email them back to you? Do you need to have them? Who needs to have them? Like, don't be vague. I don't know what you mean here.
Yeah.
Of course, I can kind of guess that like you need them, but the way she worded it, I was like,
that sounds like can you send this back to me on Friday? But if you can't, no worries.
Yeah, but it wasn't even, can you send them back? She said it would be good by Friday, but like good, what would be good? Do you want them to be finished by Friday? Do you want them back by Friday? Do I need them by Friday? Because there's questions that I need to explore before we do this work. Like, what are you asking for?
Oof.
I don't understand.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I was having another conversation with one of my friends about that, for women specifically, about being clear about what it is that you're asking. Don't beat around the bush. Don't say things like, oh, just there's so many qualifiers that we put on, or giving people an out when we really don't want them to have an out.
We could talk about that for an entire episode. I talk about that constantly on the podcast, because I'm like, listen, no more hinting. No more hinting. And if you have to start small because you're nervous about doing this, start small. Start saying at home, hey, pick up that towel, please. Start doing really little things, but you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere. And I know that, the whole topic, the umbrella topic is burnout, but I love that we spent a decent amount of time around communication, because, and tell me if I'm wrong, it sounds like at least a majority or some of burnout can be prevented by having better communication. Is that fair?
I think better communication, I think I would go a step backwards from there. Having better communication requires you to be more aware of what your wants, needs, desires, and preferences are. And if you know what your wants, needs, desires, and preferences are, you're more likely to engage with getting them met. And when you are more likely to engage with getting them met, you are less likely to burn out.
Yeah.
But you can't have the communication portion if you don't even know what you want to say.
You're just walking around feeling irritated and resentful.
And meeting everyone else's assumed needs. And they're all annoyed at you because they're like, Ma, I really don't want a sweater. I'm not cold. And you're like, but I'm cold. Here's a sweater.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I'm not. Put your sweater down. Or put it on yourself. Like, get away from me. Go get socks. Like, go away. Nobody wants your help here.
It reminds me of this funny story. Speaking of wanting a sweater for your child when they don't want one, I think every parent who's had a middle schooler can relate to this. And so I would always just buy my kids winter coats. We live in North Carolina, so it's not that bad. But I got my son a winter coat one year. I think he was in probably 6th grade. And he, it was winter. He would never wear it. And he would just wear like this thin hoodie. And I almost every morning for a while, I was like, will you wear your coat to school? No. Will you wear your coat to school? And then one morning I said, why did I even get you one then? And he goes, I don't know. I didn't make the decision to buy it.
Exactly.
What's like, at first I was like, fuck off. I would never say that to one of my kids, but it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah. Because
I was like, he's right.
Yeah. And he's a teenage boy. He's on fire all the time.
Right. And, I think it's a biological hazard as a mother to want to clothe our children because we constantly think they are cold. I remember my mom doing it to me. And that was the day I stopped buying them coats unless they specifically asked for one.
Yeah.
And also and he was, 12-ish, just like let him take the lead on his own physical needs.
Yeah. Well, and
he hasn't had a winter coat since then.
And a lot of times we do that, not just to children, but to other people in our lives, because we are afraid that other people are not speaking up about their needs because we're not speaking up about ours. Right. So we go around trying to meet all these like perceived unmet needs around us.
Trying to force people to wear the coats that we bought for them that they never asked for.
I had to carry a coat, a thin like bomber, like the one I have on now, around Key West. When my mother-in-law was visiting us, we went to Key West because she was convinced that I was going to be cold the whole time. Now I have to do extra work for 10 goddamn days. It's 82 degrees. Go away. I don't want the fucking coat. I didn't carry it around the whole time. I did just leave it there. But
But it's the way we show love.
That's not love. That's not love.
That's codependent.
It's control. It's fear. And it's an unwillingness to speak about your own needs. None of those things are love.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go, is there anything you want to circle back to, either to underscore or to add so you feel complete before we close up?
The most important thing to understand about burnout is it's not your fault. Even if there are personal factors, a lot of personal factors that added to your vulnerability to burnout, those personal factors were developed based on things that you had no control over. Period.
And where can people go to find more about you and the work that you do around burnout?
The best place is the podcast, is Fried, the Burnout Podcast. You can find it anywhere. You can pretty much find any topic related to burnout that you've ever wanted to find. And if I haven't made it yet, it's coming. So Fried.
It's in the bucket.
Yeah. So Fried, the Burnout Podcast is the best place.
Fried, the Burnout Podcast with Cait Donovan. And that link, of course, will be in the show notes, including like your socials and your website and everything. Thank you so much for being here. This was so educational for me too, and just a treat to be able to get to talk to you again.
It's always a treat to hang with you.
Oh, thank you, lady. Listeners, thank you so much for being here. I know that your time is precious and valuable, and I'm so incredibly grateful that you choose to spend it with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes, AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.